I'll be playing Star Citizen, and every now and then somebody in global chat will say something like, "Man, I'm getting old. I'm almost 30." And I just sit there thinking, buddy, I'm 63. But here's the thing, I didn't start playing video games late in life. I've been around since Pong. I've watched video games go from two paddles and a square ball on a television screen to entire galaxies you can fly through. So this isn't really a technical history of gaming. There are plenty of people who can do that better than me. This is my gaming timeline. From seeing Pong in a TV repair shop to getting an Atari for Christmas in 1977 to PC upgrades, flight simulators, space games, and somehow still being here after all these years chasing pixels across the screen. And if you're around my age and still playing games, don't worry, you're not alone. We carry on. This is the late boomers. My first memory of video games goes back to around 1975. My best friend's dad owned a TV repair shop, and I remember seeing what I believe was a Magnavox Odyssey 300, or something very close to it, set up as a display model. It was basically Pong. Two paddles, a square ball, a line down the middle. That was it. But you have to understand, back then the television was something you watched. Suddenly, here was something on the screen that you could control. That may not sound like much now, but at the time, it felt like the future sitting right there in a TV repair shop. I don't remember every detail. I don't even know for sure if I had the exact model right. But I remember the feeling. That was the first time I realized a television could be something more than a television. Not long after that, I remember seeing an Atari displayed in the Sears department store. Now, it wasn't actually called Atari. Sears had their own name and model for it, but I knew what it was. Once I saw it, I wanted one. And I mean, I wanted one. I probably never stopped letting my parents know it either. I was spoiled, I know. But for Christmas in 1977, I got the real deal. I got an Atari. And no, back then I don't remember anybody calling it an Atari 2600. To me, it was just the Atari. That Christmas changed everything. One of my favorite memories from that time is a photo of my dad sitting on the floor playing that Atari. He was not a gamer, and men, dads especially, from that generation carried themselves differently. They owned up to the responsibilities in a way that felt different from later generations. He was a grown man, a working man, a retired Air Force officer. But he was my dad. And just for a moment, sitting there on the floor with that Atari, I think it brought out the kid in him. That memory has stuck with me. Because video games weren't just something kids played. Even back then, they had the strange ability to pull people in, even people who would never call themselves gamers. Maybe that's part of why I never completely let go of them. Back then, game cartridges were around $19.99, and every time I got my allowance, I probably bought another game, or at least that's how I remember it. The one I remember most was Space Invaders. There was something about those simple little aliens coming down the screen that absolutely hooked me. And there was another space shooter I remember playing, but it was probably pretty bad. But for some reason I loved it. Sometimes memory is kinder than the game actually deserves. But I was already drawn to space. I loved Star Trek, I loved Space 1999, I loved UFO. I was hooked on electronics of all kinds, and I was hooked on space. So once video games and space games crossed paths, that was pretty much it for me. I was done. After Atari, anytime a newer console came out, I had to have it. The next big one for me was the Mattel Intellivision. I remember thinking the graphics looked more fluid. It felt like a step forward. It felt smoother, more advanced, more refined. But even then, something still felt like it was missing. Then came the ColecoVision in the early 80s. And to me, ColecoVision was about as close to arcade games as I had seen in a home console. I loved Donkey Kong, I loved Donkey Kong Jr. Those games felt different. They felt bigger, more colorful, more alive. For a while, it felt like the arcade was finally coming home. But by then, I was in college, and as much as I loved games, social activities started taking precedence. That's a polite way of saying life got busier. Gaming didn't disappear, but it moved around a little. It wasn't always front and center. That's one of the funny things about hobbies. Sometimes they fade into backgrounds, but they don't really leave. They just wait for you. In 1987, I got married. Around that time, I had also become a manager for RadioShack. And if you were into electronics back then, RadioShack was a dangerous place to work. You were surrounded by gadgets, computers, stereos, cables, parts, things you could convince yourself you needed. Sometime in the early 90s, I bought a Nintendo Entertainment Center. I don't remember playing a huge number of games on it, but I definitely remember Mario Brothers and Zelda. By then, life was different. I wasn't the kid begging my parents for an Atari anymore. I was married, I was working, I was buying these things myself. But that same interest was still there. The screen changed, the controllers changed, graphics changed, but the feeling was familiar. In 1991, I started a new job, and I would sometimes stay at the community center after hours to play computer games. That was when Shareware was thriving. You were around computers back then, you know exactly games would get passed around. Demo versions, Shareware discs, copied files, whatever people had. And of course, Wolfenstein 3D and Doom were on the menu. Wolfenstein 3D blew my mind. Then Doom came along, and even though in some ways it felt almost like a clone of Wolfenstein, I loved it anyway. It was darker, faster, louder, more intense. And back then, half the game was just getting the game to run. I would even buy games to play on those computers at the community center. One of my favorites was the LucasArts X-Wing series. Again, there's that space thing. I also had my first taste of Flight Simulator, and that became another long-running part of my gaming life. I had almost all the editions of Microsoft Flight Simulator released over the years up until 2020. There was something about flight simulators that felt different from regular games. They weren't just about winning or losing. They were about learning, exploring, trying to make something feel real, even when the graphics were nowhere near what we have today. And for someone already fascinated by electronics, space, and technology, PC gaming opened up a whole new world. Then CD-ROMs came along and changed things again. Suddenly games could be bigger. They could have more art, music, more video, more atmosphere. Myst was one of those games that felt like it belonged to a new era. It wasn't just running and shooting. It was exploring, observing, solving, and getting completely lost. Eventually, I bought my first PC. It had a 486SX chip. At the time, that felt like a serious machine. Of course, it didn't take long before games started reminding me that no computer is a serious machine for very long. Once PC gaming got its hooks into me, upgrades became part of the hobby. It wasn't just, what game do I want? It became, can my computer run it? And if the answer was no, well, suddenly I had a very good excuse to upgrade something. Doom was one thing, then Quake came out, and that felt like another leap. The environments looked less pixelated, more solid, more three-dimensional. Then I upgraded my graphics card to an ATI 3D graphics card. And I remember being awestruck by my first game I bought for it, Turok the Dinosaur Hunter. The shaders, the particles, the effects, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Today, someone might look at that and laugh, but back then those graphics were amazing. Every few years, it felt like games would make another jump, and I'd say, well, graphics can't get much better than this. And then, of course, they did. One of the biggest PC gaming memories for me was Wing Commander 3. My computer could barely play it, but I loved that game. It had full motion video, it had celebrity actors, it felt like a movie and a game combined. For someone who already loved space games, Wing Commander was right in my wheelhouse. Then, Wing Commander 4 came out, and that pretty much forced my hand. I had to upgrade. I had to upgrade my CPU to a DX, and I had to upgrade my video card to a Voodoo 3. That's how it went back then. You didn't just buy a game. Sometimes you bought the game, then realized you also needed a better computer to actually enjoy it. But Wing Commander was worth it to me. Those games hit the exact part of my imagination that had started years earlier with Star Trek, Space 1999, UFO, Atari Space Games, and Space Invaders. It's all connected. Eventually, Xbox came along, and I ended up getting one. A lot of people probably remember the original Xbox mostly for Halo, and I get that. But the game that really caught my nerdy attention was The Chronicles of Riddick. I couldn't believe the Xbox was capable of displaying graphics like that. There are certain games that may not be the biggest game in your life, but they make you stop and say, wait a minute, this machine can do that? Riddick was one of those games for me. Another big shader moment for me was Unreal. And I mean that by the game, Unreal. By this point, the timeline starts to get a little blurry. And honestly, I probably have some of this out of chronological order. But that's how my memory works. And I'm not trying to create a perfect museum exhibit here. I'm trying to tell the story of what it felt like to live through all these changes. From Atari cartridges to 3D accelerators. From blocky graphics to lighting effects and particles. From simple bleeps and bloops to full orchestral soundtracks and voice acting. It all happened in my lifetime. And I didn't just watch it happen. I played through it. Around 2015, I built what I considered my dream PC. And then gaming had changed completely. The machines were more powerful, the games were bigger, online gaming was everywhere, and the game that really held my attention was Elite Dangerous. Still does to some extent. And again, look where I ended up. Space. After all those years, I was still being pulled back to the same thing. Spaceships, stars, exploration, the feeling of being out there somewhere, even if it's all on a screen. Maybe that's the thread running through most of this story. I didn't just love games, I loved where games could take me. And then there's Star Citizen and Squadron 42. Squadron 42 caught my attention because it was connected to Chris Roberts, the creator behind the Wing Commander series. And because I loved Wing Commander so much, I wanted to believe in it. I eventually pledged around 2022 or so, and Star Citizen is, well, Star Citizen. It may be the most buggy 14-year-old unfinished game ever developed, or undeveloped, depending upon how you look at it. There's drama around it, there are people who defend it, there are people who say it's a scam, there are people who love it and hate it at the same time. And I understand all that because I've had a love-hate relationship with it myself. When it works, there are moments where it feels like the game I always dreamed about when I was playing space games as a kid. And when it doesn't work, which is often, I wonder what in the world I'm doing with my time. But maybe that's part of being a lifelong gamer too. Keep chasing the promise. Over the years, some of the games and consoles in the house were also used by my wife's sons. My wife, however, is not a gamer. Not even close. So gaming has been this thing running alongside my life. Sometimes front and center, sometimes in the background, but it never completely went away. Now, I'll get on a game like Star Citizen, and the global chat reminds me that I'm not exactly the typical young gamer. Somebody will say they're old because they're in their late 20s. Somebody else might bravely admit they're in their 30s. And every now and then, someone will say they're in their 50s. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm 63. Do I say something? Do I just stay quiet? Do I become the ancient space wizard of global chat? I don't know. But it does make me laugh. because people act like gaming belongs to the young. But some of us were there before they were born. Some of us were there before their parents were born. So why do I still play video games? I guess because I never really stopped. Games have always been a part of the background music of my life. They were there when I was a teenager, seeing Pong for the first time. They were there when I got an Atari for Christmas. They were there when my dad sat on the floor and played, even if only for a moment. They were there during college. They were there after I got married. They were there when I worked around electronics. They were there when I discovered PC gaming, shareware, flight simulators, space sims, and graphics cards. And they were there when I built computers. They were there when I upgraded computers. And they're still here now. I don't play because I'm trying to be young. I play because this has been a part of my life since I was young. There's a difference. So when someone says you still play video games at your age, my answer is yes, absolutely. I'm 63 and I still play video games because I was there when they started, showing up in homes. I was there for Pong. I was there for Atari. I was there for cartridges, arcades, shareware, CD-ROMs, sound cards, graphics cards, flight simulators, space sims, and games that barely ran on the computer I owned at the time. And somehow, after all these years, I'm still here, still playing, still getting amazed, still getting frustrated, still chasing that feeling I had the first time I realized I could control something on a television screen. So, I'm curious, what was the first video game you remember playing? Was it Pong, Atari, Nintendo, an arcade machine, a PC game? And are you still gaming today? Let me know in the comments because I know I'm not the only older gamer still out here. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe. I appreciate you. I love you. Know that God loves you. Bye-bye.
Heart still young, hands still sure. The late boomers still here. We carry on. This is the late boomers.